the first two major parts, all of this is known as the cerebrum. All of this is known as the cerebrum. This here, the bottom, this is the cerebellum. Cerebrum, cerebellum. Cerebrum, cerebellum. Now the cerebrum is divided into 4 lobes. This is the front, and the cerebellum is in the back. So this is the front, and this is the back. This lobe is the what lobe? Frontal lobe. This lobe is the parietal lobe. Good. This lobe is the occipital lobe, and these two are the temporal lobes. Very good. Now, you'll notice that the cerebrum is made up of elevations and depressions, right? The elevations are known as gyri for plural, or gyrus for singular, okay? The indentations are known as sulci, plural, or sulcus for singular, okay? So there's a very prominent sulcus right here. So if I put a piece of tape towards the front of the cerebrum, that would be your central sulcus.
Okay.
Central sulcus. What the central sulcus separates is the sensory and motor areas. What it also separates is the precentral gyrus from the postcentral gyrus. Okay, so that would be a good 2-part question. Name the sulcus, central sulcus, and what does the central sulcus separate?
Precentral and postcentral gyrus.
Gyri, or the sensory and motor areas. We'll get to that next week. There's another major sulcus that's towards the back that separates the occipital lobe from the parietal lobe, and that's known as the occipital-parietal sulcus, or the parieto-occipital sulcus. I always forget. Now, on your lab objectives, sorry, this is what you don't need to know. You don't need to know the transverse fissure. You don't need to know the lateral fissure. You don't need to know the cerebellar peduncles, even though that's so fun to say. Cerebellar peduncles. You don't need to know the epithalamus. You don't need to know the septum pellucidum. You don't need to know the mammillary bodies. And you don't need to know the lingula. Oh, and up towards the top, you don't need to know the dura mater and the arachnoid matter. You don't need to know that. Okay? Now, a separation is not only a sulcus, but it's also a fissure. And what we have is a separation that separates the 2 hemispheres all the way down the center. And that's known as the longitudinal fissure. The longitudinal fissure. If we look at the cerebellum also has 2 hemispheres. But its separation point right down the middle here is known as the vermis. Vermis. Okay? So longitudinal fissure, vermis. The folia are the indentations of the cerebellum. The indentations of the cerebellum are the folia. Okay? Now, let's open this guy up and take a look on the inside. first thing you see are what are actually fibers going into and out of the page. Now remember, this is a brain that's cut in half. So these fibers connect to these fibers, and they transmit information from one hemisphere to the other. Okay? And this is known as the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum. Just underneath that, this guy here is the fornix. This region in blue is the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus. This indentation, do you see the indentation here? That is your thalamus. And this is followed by this guy here. That is your hypothalamus. Thalamus, hypothalamus.
Could you point the thalamus again?
Thalamus, hypothalamus. Right smack in the middle of the thalamus is a yellow dot, and don't call it a yellow dot on the lab practical, because it's called the intermediate mass. The intermediate mass. Now there are two glands that you need to know in the brain. The first one is this pink guy here, and he is your pineal gland. Pineal gland. The other guy extends from the hypothalamus, and he's this guy here. This is your pituitary gland. Now, do you see this stalk-like structure here? Do you see that? Right there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
That's the infundibulum. The infundibulum. This region here, which is the same as this region here, is the tectum. Okay? This guy is the pons. This guy is the medulla oblongata. Pons, medulla oblongata. Now there's gray matter and white matter throughout the entire brain. And in the cerebellum, the white matter is known as arbor vitae. And that's all of these white branches here. Arbor vitae means the tree of life. The tree of life. Arbor vitae. Okay, is there anything on the brain that I missed? One more time? Or are we good?
One more time.
Okay.